After a big drop in the stock market, is the tech bubble about to burst? And what does that mean for the Trump administration, affordability, and free markets? First, there's still time to win my personal Daily Wire lifetime membership. One winner will get all access for life. Every feature we have today, every feature we build tomorrow, locked in for your lifetime. All you have to do is download the free Daily Wire Plus app on iOS or Android and tap follow right under this face. That is your entry. Or if you don't want to leave it to chance, you can purchase one of our 10,000 lifetime memberships yourself. Fewer than 1,500 remain. When they're gone, they are gone forever. Go to dailywire.com/lifetime for all the details or to claim your spot in Daily Wire history right now. Alrighty, so yesterday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled about 800 points. As of this morning, the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures, those were also tumbling. And the question is, what the hell is going on? And it may be that many people are beginning to realize that a lot of these big tech companies, which are investing in each other, that they are betting on a payoff from AI that may not actually accrue to those companies. So, for example, Oracle has become a heavy investor in OpenAI, which is the ChatGPT company. OpenAI is not publicly traded, but you have a bunch of publicly traded companies that are basically doing circular cash deals with OpenAI. And so if you're investing in Oracle, you are partially investing in, for example, OpenAI. Or if you are investing in NVIDIA, you are partially investing in OpenAI. A lot of money is being passed between all of these companies at the top end of the market because some provide services to other members of that particular crew. Well, the problem is the gain from AI going to accrue to OpenAI? Will it go to Meta? Who will actually benefit from the productivity increases we're going to see from AI? There's a difference between the proposition that AI is going to be transformative for the economy, which it absolutely will. You will be using AI in your job if you're not already. AI is going to increase productivity. I use AI regularly, right? Not just because Perplexity is one of our sponsors via Comet, but also because if I'm doing research, it is easier to get my research started by asking a sophisticated question of Comet, for example, and then to do my secondary research based off of that answer than it is to simply compile 10 different sources and then have to synthesize all of those sources just to answer a relatively simple question. It saves a lot of time. That's true for a lot of people, but does that mean that those companies are then reaping the benefits in terms of profits to them? What keeps the wheel spinning for those companies? That's the question. And a lot of investors are beginning to ask that particular question. According to the Wall Street Journal, U.S. stocks posted their worst day in a month, unwinding a rally that began with news of a deal to end the federal government's longest closure. Declines were broad, with tech stocks sliding alongside the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which lost almost 800 points. Shares of smaller companies dropped, with the Russell 2000 index losing 2.8%. Bitcoin also extended its recent fall, slipping back below $100,000 to its lowest 4 p.m. level since May. President Trump signed, of course, that spending legislation late on Wednesday, but investors, according to the Wall Street Journal, are now worried the incoming torrent of data could swing markets and upend bets on a December interest rate cut they'd once taken for granted. And actually, if you check with our sponsor, Kalshi, right now, on the odds that there will, in fact, be a rate cut, those odds have been plummeting all week long. They've been going down. In fact, right now, Kalshi has it as basically dead even on whether the Fed is going to cut or whether the Fed is not going to cut. Like 50-50, essentially. And I think that's about right. In fact, I'm highly skeptical the Fed is going to cut rates given the current state of the economy, because inflation has not been put to bed, because liquidity actually is not all that hard to get for businesses right now, and because inflating the economy by lowering those interest rates again and pumping more money into the economy could be a mistake. So the S&P 500 fell 1.7% on Thursday. The Dow dropped 1.7%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ composite sank 2.3%. Those are the biggest declines for all three major indices since October 10th. So what does it show? If the economy is this responsive to the possibility of a Fed rate cut or a Fed rate increase, that is not a strong economy. It isn't. If what you're worried about is whether there's going to be incrementally lower interest rates for businesses to artificially spice things up in terms of liquidity, to inject more money into the economy, and that's what you're waiting on, that does not bode well. It does not mean that the fundamentals seem particularly strong to me. Why? Well, again, because so much of what is happening at the top end of the market and the vast majority of the gains in the stock market are located in the Magnificent Seven, in those top 7 companies. The rest of the stock market over the past couple of years has been essentially flat, maybe slight increase. The top end of the market has exploded. That's what's driven the Dow Jones Industrial Average up to 48,000. But what exactly is happening at the top end of the market? So back in October, there's a piece from the New York Times that explained how much money is passing hands between companies like, for example, OpenAI and companies like NVIDIA. According to the New York Times, Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, says technological revolutions are driven by more than technology. They're driven by new ways of paying for them. He recently said, there is always a lot of focus on technological innovation. What really drives a lot of progress is when people also figure out how to innovate on the financial model. Now, that's true. I mean, new financial tools do unlock new capacities for liquidity. It is also true that new financial tools sometimes are very risky and dangerous. Over the last several years, as the New York Times points out, Mr. Altman's company has found unusual and creative ways of paying for the computing power needed to fuel its ambitions. Many of the deals OpenAI has struck with chipmakers, cloud computing companies, and others are strangely circular. OpenAI receives billions from tech companies before sending those billions back to the same companies to pay for computing power and other services. So, for example, from 2019 through 2023, Microsoft was OpenAI's primary investor. Microsoft pumped more than $13 billion into the startup, and then OpenAI funneled most of those billions back into Microsoft, buying cloud computing power needed to fuel the development of new AI technologies. By the summer of last year, OpenAI could not get all the computing power they wanted from Microsoft, so they started signing cloud computing contracts with other companies, including Oracle and little-known startups with names like CoreWeave. Across 3 different deals signed this year, OpenAI agreed to pay CoreWeave, a company that builds AI data centers, more than $22 billion for computing power. As part of these agreements, OpenAI received $350 million in CoreWeave stock, which could ultimately help pay for this computing power. OpenAI struggled to get additional investment from Microsoft, so instead it went to SoftBank, which then lent it $40 billion. At the same time, OpenAI has been working with various companies to build its own computing data centers, rather than relying on cloud computing deals, and that includes SoftBank. So the company is raising $100 billion to help OpenAI build data centers in Texas and Ohio. Oracle has agreed to spend $300 billion building new data centers for OpenAI in Texas, New Mexico, Michigan, and Wisconsin. OpenAI will then pay Oracle roughly the same amount to use these computing facilities over the next several years. So, again, there's a lot of circular money movement right here. Last month, NVIDIA announced it intends to invest $100 billion in OpenAI over the next several years, which will help OpenAI pay for its new data centers. And then OpenAI will use that money to buy chips from NVIDIA. So again, there's nothing particularly corrupt about all of this, but it's everybody betting on the same horses over and over and over and over. If you keep betting on the same horses over and over and over, and those horses don't come in, things get ugly. What happens if OpenAI does not deliver the gains it has promised to everybody? Well, it's not going to be able to pay for all of those bills. It's not going to be able to pay Oracle or NVIDIA or any of the other companies that have bet on it. In fact, according to Barron's, Oracle stock has given back all the gains from the cloud computing group NVIDIA moment as investors grow increasingly cautious over investments linked to the AI boom, and shares just keep falling. When Oracle reported earnings in September, the results included a massive revenue forecast. That forecast has become a source of consternation due to the source of that revenue, OpenAI, which plans to spend $1.4 trillion building and accessing AI data centers over the next decade. In fact, Oracle is also trading, at least in part, as a proxy for OpenAI. Remember, OpenAI is a private company. What does that mean? It means you and I, we can't buy stock in OpenAI. The only companies that are buying stock from OpenAI are making private deals for OpenAI. Okay, but it is not publicly traded, so we don't know its actual real market valuation at this point. And again, are the gains to OpenAI, the profits to OpenAI, going to accrue to a multiple of 7 or 10 or 15 from where they currently are, their earnings? That would just be to pay their bills and keep the lights on. And that would have to happen pretty fast. One of its biggest commitments is a reported $300 billion agreement to buy computing power for Oracle. That deal represented about 65% of its so-called RPO forecast that sent the stock soaring in early September. But a lot has happened since then. Oracle tapped the corporate bond market for an $18 billion debt sale that triggered a wave of new issues from tech giants like Meta. Private credit markets wobbled following a spate of auto-related bankruptcies, and broader market liquidity dried up. So again, one of the reasons why they're going to need market liquidity is to make these sorts of deals. So again, optimism around AI, eventually it could peter out, given the fact that earnings, it's going to take a while for those earnings to actually accrue. And stock traders, unless the stock keeps going up, caution is warranted. And so people are starting to divest a little bit from the top of the market. That's why you're seeing the market start to drop a little bit right now. And you could see that turn into a wave if, for example, OpenAI ever reports any bad news. Or if one of these other major AI companies starts to report decreased profit share. Or people start to think, generally speaking, that it'll take longer for AI to filter into every aspect of the market and then down to the original companies than they thought it would. There's some early indicators that's happening, by the way. Already coming up, more economic reports, some little bit disquieting. We'll get to that in a moment. First, Grand Canyon University, an affordable private Christian university based in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, is one of the largest universities in the country. Praised for its culture of community and impact, GCU integrates the free market system, a welcoming Christian worldview, and free and open discourse into 369 academic programs with over 300 online. Join a nationwide community of learners redefining online education through GCU's 100% online MBA degree program. Learn ethical entrepreneurship and scale your business to serve your community. In addition to federal grants and aid, GCU's online students received nearly $161 million in institutional scholarships in 2024. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/myoffer to see the scholarships you may qualify for. GCU is a terrific school. Their campus is beautiful. Great people over there. I visited their campus, but I mean, it really is like a gorgeous campus. And again, you're going to get an education that's actually worth it because they're not going to teach you a bunch of trash values. Instead, they'll teach you eternal truths. Head on over to gcu.edu/myoffer and check them out. Also, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. We all make decisions every day. On Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season on Prize Picks. Whether you're a football fan, basketball fan of both, the way that I am, it always feels good to be right. So producer Jake, who is the guy who's doing this the most, he has some more action on the NFL this weekend. He's been doing well, not well enough to quit yet. Jake picked Casey's Travis Kelce to have fewer than 42.5 receiving yards versus Denver on Sunday. He also picked Matthew Stafford to have more than 1.5 pass touchdowns versus Seattle. Those both seem like good bets to me. Travis Kelce feels like he's a little on the wane. No, Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and when you get your picks right, you could cash in. Here's what's new. Prize Picks now offers stacks, so you can pick the same player up to 3 times in one lineup. Want to go all in on Steph Curry's points, threes, assists? Well, now you can stack them all together in the same lineup only on Prize Picks. You can also follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend or just somebody whose picks you like, hit that button, check out every lineup they create in that new feed tab, and if one of your players gets injured in the first half and doesn't come back, Prize Picks won't count it as a loss with their injury reboots. Withdrawals are fast and secure. Options like Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits. Join millions of users on America's #1 fantasy sports app. Download Prize Picks today. Put your skills to the test this season. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code BEN. Get $50 in lineups after you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. According to CNBC, professional investors have been using the market's record-setting run as an opportunity to take profits. Retail investors have been doing much of the heavy lifting in the latest run of the 3-year-old bull market. Hedge funds and other institutional clients have been the biggest net sellers of single stocks and exchange-traded funds this year, unloading more than $67 billion worth of equities in 2025. Now, if institutional investors are being replaced by retail investors, institutional investors are significantly more sophisticated than retail investors, just generally speaking. Hedge fund managers are doing this for a living. They're doing this with large amounts of money. They're doing this with 401ks and trust funds. They're doing this with gigantic pension funds. So if, in fact, they are pulling out of the market and you are buying stock from a hedge fund, you might want to think about who's more sophisticated, you or the hedge fund. Retail investors might be pushing up the market, but the reality is that the people who are the sophisticated investors are saying, I'm going to get out while the getting is good, at least at the top end of the market. Now, again, I'm not saying that a stock market crash is imminent. I'm saying that there is a bubble, it seems to me, in a lot of areas. In real estate, there's a bubble. In tech, there is a bubble. And when you have a market that is this frothy, the possibility of bubbles bursting is pretty robust. That doesn't mean recession or depression, but it does mean the possibility of stagnation, since, again, so much economic growth right now is predicated on tech. According to the CNBC, retail investors have been the market's backbone, the most consistent dip buyer since 2020, a behavior forged during the pandemic rebound, the Wall Street Investment Bank said. That strategy has paid off handsomely as the S&P 500 reached multiple all-time highs this year. Now, again, why? Part of the inflationary market is people actually getting more dollars from the federal government. one of the reasons why there's been a push by many members of the government for the Federal Reserve to lower those interest rates is because they're hoping retail investors will take that money and then sink it back into the stock market. That tension will be in focus this week as scores of high-profile institutional investors gather at CNBC's Delivering Alpha Investor Summit on Thursday in New York City, offering the world a chance to hear how some of the industry's most influential voices are navigating this volatile market. Again, I would be wary, and frankly, I am wary. Meanwhile, other signs that things may be starting to slow. Foreclosures are once again on the rise in the United States. New data from ATTOM shows more homeowners falling behind on their mortgages amid job losses and soaring living costs, according to the Daily Mail. In October alone, there were 36,766 foreclosure filings, the first step up in the process when a lender warns a borrower they're in default. That's up 3% from September and 19% from a year ago. Today's homeowners have safer loans, and the real estate values haven't dropped so dramatically. So if a bank has to foreclose, it's not like it's going to completely take the legs out from under the bank the way that it did during the crash of 2008. But as those foreclosure rates go up, a couple things happen. One is good and one is bad. The good thing that's happening is that is the additional supply that you need in the market. So if you're worried about not being able to afford a house, it turns out that when people can't afford their current houses and they get out and the bank has to seize that house and then resell it, the prices are going to go down. It's additional supply. But it is also a sign that people can't afford things right now. Both those things are true at the same exact time. Meanwhile, companies are cutting jobs. I mean, there's no question this is happening. Verizon is planning to cut roughly 15,000 jobs. The cuts are the largest ever for the carrier, according to the Wall Street Journal. They're set to take place in the next week. The majority of the reduction is expected to be made through layoffs. Verizon is also going to transition its stores into franchised operations, which is going to shift employees off of its own payroll. Now, they've lost a lot of phone subscribers. There's a lot of competition in this area, for sure. But again, one of the things that we are seeing here is big companies that are running into headwinds, clearly. Okay, so if affordability is a problem, if we are worried about the stock market, if we're concerned that Americans are going to suffer some significant temporary job dislocation as AI starts to filter into the market, if we're doing, what is the solution to all of that? Now, there are two solutions that are basically being offered. One used to be called left wing and one used to be called right wing, but we don't actually have a left and a right anymore since pretty much all economic discussions now cross-cut. There are people who are voting Republican who agree with Elizabeth Warren on economics. I can't say there are a lot of people who are voting Democrat who agree with me on economics, but that is what it is. The Democrats' proposal is socialism. Their proposal is big government interventionism. Ban things, regulate things, force sales, take over businesses, tax the hell out of people. More government involvement supposedly will solve affordability. It will supposedly create more broad-based prosperity. Take money away from the top end of the market, supposedly get rid of the market cap of Oracle or Meta, and suddenly people will become richer. Now, again, there's no logic to this. The thing that actually makes people richer is innovation. The thing that actually makes people's lives better is innovation. Remember, money is just a ruler. The amount of money you make is a ruler. What I mean by that is you use a ruler to measure things. The amount of money you make is a measurement of the goods that you can buy in exchange for the money. So you could titularly be making tons and tons and tons of money in a particular currency. If the currency is inflated and you're carrying it around in a wheelbarrow, it'll buy you nothing. That's true in, for example, Venezuela. It was true until very recently in Argentina. The real question is, what's the kind of stuff that you can get today? Innovation makes your stuff better and it makes your stuff cheaper. Competition makes your stuff better and it makes your stuff cheaper. All of that is true. But socialists believe that if they take control of all of the means of distribution, it used to be about the means of production. They seem to have given up on that in large part. Now they're more about the means of distribution of cash. If they just redistribute all day long, this will somehow make Americans better off. But again, the reality is forward progress in material terms is reliant on innovation, on the development of new products and services. Democrats don't want to believe this. So one of your choices is Mamdaniism, where you yell about how things are unfair, and then you try to tax the hell out of people, and then they leave your jurisdiction, and then you tax the hell out of the second richest people, and then they leave your jurisdiction. And then the services you're providing don't actually stack up, because it turns out that if nobody has an interest in protecting private property, then actually the places they live get worse. This is what happened with supposed affordable housing in, for example, St. Louis. When the government tried this in the 60s, they tried to build these gigantic affordable housing complexes, government owned, and people treated them like trash because they felt no actual responsibility for a thing they didn't own. Nonetheless, this is what Democrats are pushing. This would be the AOC wing of the Democratic Party. So AOC and parts of the Democratic Party that are growing believe that sort of traditional Democratic Party politics are over, that it's time to basically shut everything down in the name of vast government redistributionism.
Especially with this administration, my concern is that the lesson that they're learning is that Democrats are weak, and that next time we just need to hurt working people and working Americans more to get them to fold. And I don't want them to learn that lesson, and I want us to be a party that says we're going to get results for people.
Okay, the AOC part of the Democratic Party is on the ascent. There's no question that's the case. Yesterday, Zohran Mamdani, the self-stated socialist, held a secretive meeting, according to the New York Post, with far-left U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren on Wednesday, a sit-down that was captured by an eagle-eyed New Yorker whose office is across from the mayor-elect's headquarters. She then tweeted out, "Tax the rich, billionaire tears not pictured." Which, I mean, pathetic. Truly pathetic. Tax the rich, billionaire tears not pictured. Okay, the people who are paying all the bills in New York City are the rich people. Okay, that is just true by the tax receipts in New York City. There are a lot of people in New York who pay taxes. The people who are paying net taxes, meaning taxes minus the benefits received from the government, those people are at the top of the income spectrum. That is also true federally. But the idea here is to punish rich people, that if you just punish them hard enough, suddenly things will get better. Now, the problem with this theory is it doesn't work. Punishing the rich doesn't make everybody richer. It just makes rich people poorer. That's all. And then everybody gets poorer because nobody has money to invest in innovation, for example. And I understand all the dyspepsia about innovation. I just talked about some of the dyspepsia in the middle of a bubble. Joseph Schumpeter, the famous economist, talked about creative destruction. He talked about the idea that when you have markets, free markets tend to make bad things in the market or less efficient things in the market obsolete, and that destroys them. And in the short term, that looks bad, but it's creative because what grows out of that is something better. That if you want an automobile-based economy, it will destroy the wheelwrights. The people who make wheels for wagons, those people will no longer actually have a job. But then they will find new jobs. And so in the moment, it'll look really bad. Okay, that's also true with regard to AI. I understand there are some of the AI doomers out there who believe that AI is going to take everybody's job. I don't believe that's the case. I think that AI will end up being a supplement in the way that virtually all other technologies are supplements to your jobs. There are certain jobs that will probably get automated out of existence, where AI will do them. Ironically, those will likely be the very white-collar jobs that the media was touting about 15 years ago, when members of the media were telling welders to code. Well, now it seems much more likely that coders are going to have to learn to weld because AI is actually quite good at the things that the coders taught the AI to do, like coding. So it'll be fascinating to see which ways the job market moves. In fact, the job market is likely to move more toward blue collar than it is to move toward sort of middle management, white collar. But the market will change and the market will move. Things will become more efficient. Everything will become cheaper. These are good things. Again, not to pretend there are no downsides to AI, particularly in the immediate term. But the sort of Luddite philosophy that if you take a technology out to a field and beat it to death with a hammer, that somehow you're going to be able to prevent the future from happening, unlikely. Other countries like China will just take an advantage on you, and then they will undercut your entire market, and they will gain global market share, and they will gain more geopolitical power. And you will have worse products for a higher price, working a worse job. That is the likely outcome of worse tech. Because historically, that's the outcome of worse tech. Coming up, we'll get into what should the strategy be with regard to affordability and the housing market and all the rest. But first, look, I'm on the road constantly, covering news stories, political events, you name it. Between the flights and the hotel room, sometimes getting that proper nutritional meal is the first thing that goes out the window. But here's the thing. I've got a wife and kids at home, and I need to stay healthy. That's why I started taking Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies supplements. These are the original whole food supplements, 16 fruits, 15 veggies, freeze-dried into capsules. As somebody who keeps kosher, I appreciate there are no binders, no fillers, no flow agents, just 100% whole food ingredients, nothing that shouldn't be in there. When I'm rushing through an airport, I can take them with water. If I'm in the car between interviews, I can chew them. Sometimes I'll pop those capsules, mix the powder into my smoothies. However the day is going, Balance of Nature makes my day go better. Balance of Nature delivers the natural goodness of fruits, veggies, spices, and fibers, just as nature intended, which means even when I'm a couple thousand miles from home, I'm still taking care of myself the way my family needs me too. After years of research and development, they've truly created something that makes getting proper nutrition convenient for any lifestyle. Head on over, balanceofnature.com, get a free fiber and spice supplement plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code Shapiro. Also, it is November. Gift-giving season is looming like a certain socialist mayor over New Yorker's wallets. But you don't have to sweat it because the Daily Wire shop is your go-to for conservative gifting. Introducing the all-new Truth Bomb driver and putter covers. Behold these. Behold. Cast your eyes upon these products and notice what you could have. But it's not just that. We also have, check this out. This is the Lions and Scavengers hoodie. It's actually very cool. It fits beautifully. You will love wearing this every second of the day. Well, you can get these and up to 30% off great gifts for conservatives in your life, like this New York Times bestseller. Look, this one right here, Lions and Scavengers. The signed copies are available only at the Daily Wire shop. And again, like that sweatshirt, that was inspired by the book. Go to dailywire.com/shop. Take advantage of early Black Friday deals. Enjoy holiday anticipation stress-free. We're launching all new items, and you can get great deals on all your favorites, so keep checking back. That's dailywire.com/shop. So what are the actual strategies that people who are, say, capitalists can use with regard to a lot of the economic unease right now? Because there's no question people are feeling uneasy. And that's totally understandable. Prices are really high, obviously. It costs a lot of money to buy a home. There's a big argument online yesterday about, in 1950, a man and his wife and his 2 kids, he could work a job and he could own a home, and you can't do that today. And people were pointing out that the homes in 1950 kind of sucked. They were like 900 square feet. And the guy's job wasn't that great. He was riveting in a factory. And also the entire rest of the world was destroyed by World War II. That's true. But that doesn't alleviate the fact that there are a lot of people right now who would like to buy a home who cannot afford to buy a home. So what policy changes can be made? We've been talking about this for days. Now, again, there are 2 separate questions to be asked that people are conflating, I think, dishonestly. One is, what should you on a personal level do right now? And the answer for you on a personal level is to make a personal decision. And that personal decision may involve looking at your circumstances, where you live, and deciding you can get a better job elsewhere. And that's not the end of the world. That is not, in fact, a fundamental betrayal of the American contract. Okay, you deciding that you wish to leave home to go to college, that you wish to leave college to go to a different city for a job. And people have been doing this for literally all of human history and all of American history. Now, that's a different question from what can we do on a broad national or local scale in order to make things more affordable. New York is never going to be as affordable as Des Moines, Iowa. It's not going to. Nothing you do. There are no policy things you can do that will make New York as affordable as Des Moines. Why? Because there are a lot more people in New York and a lot less real estate in New York and a lot more demand and a lot less supply. So things will be more expensive in New York. That's just a reality of the world. And yes, there are things you can do to bring down costs somewhat significantly, but it's never going to be the price of Iowa to live in New York. That's just not the way that it works. It has never worked that way. And literally all of human history has never worked that way. So recognizing economic realities, what can you do to alleviate some of these problems? Well, I'll tell you what you can't do is denial. Politically speaking, denial is a bad idea. So the administration lately has tried this. Again, this is nothing new. Barack Obama used to do this. Back when the economy under Barack Obama was bad, which it was, Barack Obama used to say that people just don't understand what we're doing. If we just articulate it better, then they'll understand. That tack never works. President Trump has been trying to do this a little bit. He's been going on shows and doing interviews in which he says that people just don't understand how good the economy is. Again, trying to talk people into feeling good. Try it with your wife sometime. Seriously. Like, talking people into feeling good is almost never successful. The vice president was trying that yesterday. Here he was on Fox News.
I know that there are a lot of people out there, Sean, who are saying things are expensive. And we have to remember they're expensive because we inherited this terrible inflation crisis from the Biden administration. But you've already seen signs that things are getting better. The price of eggs has gone way down. The price of energy has gone way down. The price of gasoline has gone way down. And as we know, when the price of energy goes down, that starts to filter out into the entire economy. But that also takes a little bit of time.
Okay, so, yeah, again, that is not wrong. It's just not likely to be convincing to the American people. So what strategies can actually be tried? Well, one strategy is to yell at the Fed. Okay, the administration has tried this also. Yelling at the Fed, telling them they need to lower those interest rates more to therefore inject more liquidity into the economy, and that this somehow won't be inflationary. Here's the thing. all the Fed can do is control the money supply. That's all they do. They control the money supply. They do it directly and they do it indirectly. Okay, the indirect version is by lowering that open market's overnight rate. That's the way they low. You can go view a YouTube video that I did a few years back, searching on YouTube, where I explain exactly what the Federal Reserve does in order to inject liquidity into the economy and how it relates to inflation. Okay, Peter Navarro, who of course is a tariff hawk, he loves tariffs, big on tariffs. He's blaming Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve for lack of growth.
I think that Jay Powell is almost purposely being obstructionist to this administration. He's been screwed us the last time. He's doing it again. I don't know why. The man is costing this country literally hundreds of billions of dollars in growth and thousands of jobs.
And so, no, actually, I'm not a fan of Jerome Powell's policies. I think that he's been late on the ball every time. I think he was inflationary. I think that inflationary policy has been significantly more damaging than the somewhat moderate delays in lowering those interest rates. Blaming Jerome Powell for stagnation, you can blame Jerome Powell for inflation. Blaming him for stagnation, I think, is another question. That's not going to do it. So what could do it? Ironically, the Trump administration is now tacitly acknowledging that the tariff regime that they put in place actually does damage Americans at, for example, the supermarket. So yesterday, the Trump administration said import taxes on coffee and bananas will be lowered as part of trade deals with 4 Latin American countries. The agreements with Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador come as President Trump faces scrutiny over his handling of the economy and concerns about affordability. As part of an initial framework, a reciprocal tariff of 10% will stay on goods from Guatemala, Argentina, and El Salvador, as will a 15% tax on imports from Ecuador into the U.S. But the deals will exempt products that cannot be produced in the United States in sufficient quantities, like coffee. The U.S.-Argentina deal also addresses beef producers' access to foreign markets. So I'm just going to point out right now that this is a tacit admission that tariffs increase prices on American consumers. That's what it is. If you say, I want the prices to go down on bananas, and thus I have removed the tariffs on bananas, what does that mean? It means that, yes, by restricting supply through tariffs to bananas, the prices of bananas go up. This is true for all other products as well. When you put tariffs on products, the prices tend to go up because, of course, you're putting an artificial restriction on the supply of the product. As we discussed yesterday and will continue to discuss, the laws of supply and demand are very basic. If the demand remains stable and the supply goes down, the prices go up. Again, if there are fewer bananas and the same number of people to buy those bananas and more people competing to buy those bananas, the price goes up. So the president acknowledging that coffee is too expensive and bananas are too expensive, and thus perhaps we should lower the tariffs on coffee and bananas. What if we took that logic and extended over a wide variety of other products? Wouldn't that be nice? That might seem like a thing worth doing. Okay, one of the things worth pointing out is that when the president says he's keeping blanket tariffs on countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, Argentina, and then he says he's going to carve out things like bananas and coffee, that is a pretty giant carve out. In fact, I asked our sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, what are the top products exported to the United States by Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, and Argentina? Please list percentages. The top exports from Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, and Argentina to the United States consist mainly of agricultural products, textiles, and primary commodities, with most recent percentages reflecting their significance in trade for 2024 to 2025. Guatemala, 22.9% of their export market to the United States is bananas. Another 11% is knit sweaters, and 9% is coffee. Other products include melons, papayas, and apparel. So I just have a question. Are those products you want to pay more for because we are protecting the domestic papaya industry or the domestic melon industry? It seems to me the answer is no. How about El Salvador? El Salvador, 44.5% of their exports to the United States are knit or crocheted apparel. I mean, I understand that the knitting industry in the United States requires significant protection. I mean, the Knitters Association of America must be upheld at all costs. But, I mean, come on. Ecuador, crude oil is 25.1%. Fish, 20.3%. Fruits and nuts like bananas and plantains, 12.4%. Cocoa, 11%. So, you know, when I look at these percentages, I think these are pretty big carve-outs, number one. And number two, this is, in fact, a tacit admission. Of course, because basic economics is correct, that if you wish to lower prices, perhaps you should remove trade barriers on the countries that are going to supply you cheaper and better products. By the way, it is worth noting that there is a reason why competitors try to cut off foreign markets for their competitors. So again, tacit admission. According to the Wall Street Journal, Amazon is now joining Microsoft in supporting legislation that threatens to further limit NVIDIA's ability to export to China. The moves by Microsoft and Amazon to work against a company they are deeply intertwined with highlights the fierce nature of the AI race. The companies are all jockeying for favorable policy to stay ahead of competitors. NVIDIA is fighting for access to the Chinese market despite security concerns. Microsoft came out publicly in favor of legislation in order to stop the distribution of NVIDIA chips. Officials at Amazon's cloud unit have said that they support it as well. Why? Well, because it gives Microsoft and Amazon preferential access to the chips at their data centers around the world. Now, I actually agree that there should be significant restrictions on the export of NVIDIA chips to China. The Chinese are our enemies. They are our geopolitical opponents. Shipping them our best tech is a huge, gigantic mistake. But I think one of the reasons, obviously, Microsoft and Google and Amazon are doing all of this is because they would very much prefer to have preferential pricing on the chips by removing a potential market in China. Okay, so affordability, the Federal Reserve ain't going to do it. How about trade? Well, maybe if we got rid of some of those tariffs, that would help, which is, again, a free market policy. How about deregulation? Deregulation would help. Well, the Trump administration is, in fact, pursuing that in some areas. The Trump administration announced Thursday that oil and gas drilling would be allowed in a fragile expanse of tundra and wetlands in northern Alaska that is home to caribou, grizzly bears, and thousands of migratory birds. I remember writing about this back when I was in college. That was now 25 years ago. The move reverses actions taken during the Biden administration to restrict development in half of the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, that is 23.5 million acres of federal land in the North Slope. The expanse is some of the last remaining pristine wilderness in the country. Okay, America has a lot of wilderness and a lot of pristine wilderness, of course. Unlocking more jobs, unlocking more oil production will bring down prices. That is the nature of creating more supply. That is a good policy. On healthcare, the GOP can also move to make things more affordable. How? By removing regulations. The reality is that the Democrats have suggested, again, when we talk about Democrat solutions, they always involve redistribution and seizure of wealth. The Democrats have suggested the only way to bring down the cost of healthcare is to subsidize healthcare, therefore raising the cost of healthcare. There's a reason that the price of healthcare in the United States has continued to outpace the market. Rich Lowry has a good column at the New York Post. He says, as Avik Roy of the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity points out, and Avik Roy is a very, very good scholar, Barack Obama ran for president promising his healthcare reform would reduce premiums by $2,500 per family. Roy notes that the premiums for the benchmark silver Obamacare plans have nearly tripled since 2013. Deductibles for those same silver plans have more than doubled, outpacing the rate of increase for employer-sponsored plans. So actually, the price of Obamacare is increasing faster than like your private health insurance. Democrats don't even pretend anymore that Obamacare is going to reduce the cost. Instead, they say we have to just keep pouring money down that rat hole. The biggest problem with Obamacare, of course, is that it redistributes healthcare coverage from young people to old people. That's what it does. It forces young people to buy a particular level of healthcare coverage in order to be covered in the Obamacare exchanges. And then they use that money to pay for older people and their health insurance. Instead, what Avik Roy proposes is a more free market solution, what's called a reinsurance program, which pays the cost of people with pre-existing conditions. Which is a straight up subsidy to people with pre-existing conditions, which has always been the problem, because insurance for people who have pre-existing conditions is not insurance, it's just healthcare. I can't buy insurance for a broken leg after I have a broken leg. If I do that, that's just called healthcare. It's like buying fire insurance for your house after it's burned down already. The age ban imposed by Obamacare, which mandates that young people can't pay too much less than old people, should be eliminated. Obamacare taxes should be repealed. You should be able to buy catastrophic plans, particularly for people who are young, because if you're young, your minor injuries aren't going to cost you that much money. It's really only if you have, a car wreck or a serious disease that you need serious health insurance coverage. Again, free market solutions here would be a good thing. And Republicans should explain that, because otherwise you're just going to have Democrats explaining that we should continue to pour money down the rat hole of Obamacare. And then we get to housing. Now, again, the Trump administration keeps throwing out government-based solutions for the housing issue. The reality is that if you wish for there to be more supply of housing, you need to allow people the market conditions to build more supply of housing. That's how that works. You need a higher supply. Now, One thing that the vice president said about this, and he and I have pretty significant disagreements on our economic vision, but he is right that deporting 30 million illegal immigrants would definitely help. I mean, you have a lot of people in the country who should not be here and who are taking up housing space. Here's the vice president.
A lot of young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought by right go to American citizens. And at the same time, we weren't building enough new houses to begin with, even for the population that we had. So what we're doing is trying to make it easier to build houses, trying to make it easier to build factories and things like that so that people have good jobs. We're also getting all of those illegal aliens out of our country, and you're already seeing it start to pay some dividends.
Now, again, he's not wrong about this. We have way too many people in this country who do not belong in this country, obviously. Obviously, that's true. But is that going to solve the housing affordability crisis? The answer is not really. The actual thing that's going to solve the housing affordability crisis is deregulation. It's going to be free market capitalism. It's actually going to be banks making real decisions about who can afford a home and where. Otherwise, you end up with government subsidies that push up the price of housing by giving many, many people who probably don't have the credit worthiness to get a private loan access to houses, which then will go bust. And then you have, again, a repeat of subprime housing crises. Government-based solutions tend to have precisely the opposite effect of what they are attempting to achieve. So markets, free market capitalism. No one talks about this anymore. I don't know when it fell out of fashion for the right to stop talking about free markets and to instead suggest that government solutions are the actual answer. You know, growing up as a conservative, this was sort of rote conservatism, was the idea that private property, free markets should be, at least in the first instance, the solution. Doesn't mean all problems will be solved by markets, but it does mean that if you get rid of markets or heavily intervene in markets or put your grubby government fingers on the markets, you're skewing all the incentive structures and you end up undermining the very thing that you are attempting to do in the vast majority of cases. Alrighty, meanwhile, the Democrats, some Republicans, they continue to try to attack President Trump over Jeffrey Epstein. And nothing has been released from the new Epstein emails that is particularly shocking about President Trump. Literally nothing. I'm waiting for the supposed smoking gun in the same way that I was waiting for the Russiagate smoking gun for years and years and years, and it never happened. And it feels very much the same at this point. Now, again, I'm fine with all of the Epstein files being whatever is available, what can be released. Not only am I fine with it, I think it would be good. Again, more transparency is better. And I think that there is a Streisand effect thing that is going on where the president says that he wants to abide by the law, and then he brings people in and he browbeats them because he doesn't want certain files being released. And people are asking, well, why does he not want the files? Like, again, that's a Barbara Streisand effect. Is there anything there? I highly, highly doubt it. Again, the Biden administration had full control over all of these files for 4 years. If there was something, some smoking gun about Donald Trump and children there, you don't think the Biden administration would have leaked it? Donald Trump's personal tax returns were leaked. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. Democrats, however, are out there spinning up every old story, every unspecified allegation. For example, Representative Robert Garcia went on MSNBC and then claimed that Epstein was doing his work at Mar-a-Lago, which, again, there is no support for this idea evidentiarily, that Mar-a-Lago was like a center of human trafficking on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein.
The reality is that every time we get a new batch of documents, there are a lot more questions. And in my opinion, signs point back to the White House. When you think about Epstein, his sex trafficking ring, Ghislaine Maxwell, all of this happened in New York. It happened in South Florida. It happened at Mar-a-Lago. They ran in the same circles.
So, a little much. And you can see now who's pushing this. Right? Democrats who wish to smear President Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, and some Republicans who wish to smear President Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, mainly because they don't like a lot of Trump's policies and are trying to undermine his credibility within his own party. Again, I think the solution to that is more transparency, but I'm not sure that that's going to solve it because there are some ill-motivated actors, shall we say. Meanwhile, CNN is now trotting out old stories again. So CNN brought forth a swimsuit model named Stacey Williams, who claims that she was groped by Trump all the way back in 1993. Now, this has been in the public eye for a long, long time. In fact, it was already brought out, I think, last year or 2 years ago. But CNN's going to retell it again. Here we go.
He writes, my 20-year-old girlfriend in 93 that after 2 years I gave to Donald. Now, by the way, you met him in 1992. When you see that, though, in this email in black and white, I quote unquote gave to Donald. What's your reaction?
I mean, it screams about, you know, the mindset of these men. You know, the same two men who did what they did to me when Jeffrey Epstein walked me into Donald Trump's office to be groped by him. Clearly, we are these objects, these trophies, and it's deeply misogynistic.
Okay, now again, this was dealt with last year. Right? I mean, this is not anything new. According to The Guardian, this is more than a year ago. A former model who says she met Donald Trump through the late sexual abuser Jeffrey Epstein has accused the former president of groping and sexually touching her in an incident in Trump Tower in 1993 in what she believed was a twisted game between the two men. Now, again, she only came out with this story, I guess, in 2024. I'm wondering why it would take you 21 years to tell that story, given the, 31 years to tell that story, given the fact that Donald Trump has already been president once and has been the most famous person on earth for, several decades at this point. Caroline Leavitt at the time, who was a press secretary for the Trump campaign, said these accusations made by a former activist for Barack Obama and announced on a Harris campaign call 2 weeks before the election are unequivocally false. It's obvious this fake story was contrived by the Harris campaign. Now, again, the attempt to retell these stories anew because Democrats leaked 3 emails out of context to the New York Times, it's not just silly, it's actually wildly counterproductive for the body politic. And meanwhile, in what is an actual scandal, remember Representative Matt Gaetz? Remember that time when the Trump administration briefly attempted to nominate him for attorney general, and then the entire Republican caucus went, what now? Well, it turns out the entire Republican caucus was right. What now was the proper response to the idea that Representative Matt Gaetz should be Attorney General of the United States, according to the New York Times. She was 17 and a high school junior in Florida. She was working at McDonald's, and she was living in and out of a homeless shelter. Hoping to save up to buy braces to fix her teeth, she falsely advertised herself in 2017 as 18 years old on a website that matches men looking for companionship with young women looking to make money. What followed would set off a chain of events that would have a dramatic impact on her life and help upend the political career of one of the men she would encounter, Representative Matt Gaetz, the Florida Republican. A bipartisan Health Ethics Committee investigation determined there was substantial evidence he had sex with the 17-year-old. The report included testimony from the girl about how she was paid by Gaetz for the sex. In response to a request from McClatchy, a federal judge has now unsealed court documents from a related civil case that shed some light on the girl's background. Apparently, she was a then homeless 17-year-old high schooler. The girl's lawyer agreed to confirm some basic biographical information about her client. So, again, apparently, the girl began this path of meeting Gaetz during her junior year in high school. In December 2016, she turned 17. Her parents were divorced. One of them was so poor, the parent was living in and out of a homeless shelter. When the girl and her siblings were staying with that parent, they lived also in the homeless shelter. To make extra money, the girl worked at McDonald's. She began looking for other ways to make money and turned to a website that advertised itself as a sugar dating website that primarily connected older men and younger women seeking mutually beneficial relationships. Through the website, in April of her junior year in high school, she met Joel Greenberg, a Florida tax collector who is a friend and ally of Gaetz. Greenberg invited the 17-year-old to a meeting on his boat. At that meeting, they did not have sex, but Greenberg paid her $400. He also gave her ecstasy and told her to try it at home. Then he contacted her again, and then they met up at a hotel where they had sex, and she was paid another $400. Apparently, he would have sex with her 7 times for money before she turned 18, and he would give her ecstasy. On July 15th, 2017, he asked the girl and others to attend a party at the home of Chris Dorworth, a former Republican member of the Florida State House, who at the time worked as a lobbyist for Ballard Partners. At the party, the girl who was 17 later testified both cocaine and ecstasy were offered to her. She took ecstasy and drank. She testified she danced naked in front of Mr. Dorworth and swam naked in the pool. Gaetz was there along with a girlfriend. Apparently, the girl twice had sex with Gaetz that evening. A court document quotes her as having testified she had sex with him once on a pool table or an air hockey table. She testified Dorworth saw Gaetz have sex with her on the game table and then laughed about it with other party goers. And she says that she saw Gaetz use cocaine that night. So, not great, Bob. I'm just going to put it out. I don't think he would have made a good attorney general. I don't. I just don't. Now, I will say that there are a group of Democrats, there are a large group of people on the left who would say that this sort of thing is bizarrely legitimate, to which I say, what the hell, man? Of course it isn't. It's ridiculous and disgusting and horrible. This is why when people say that sex work is work, well, no. Sex is something very different from other types of quote-unquote work. And anybody claiming otherwise, it's ridiculous. Okay, meanwhile, other members of Congress now under scrutiny. Apparently, Eric Swalwell is under scrutiny. He is under scrutiny, apparently, for theoretically or allegedly taking out another bad mortgage. The DOJ has opened a probe, according to Fox News, into Swalwell over alleged mortgage fraud. Swalwell then went on MSNBC to respond. Here he was.
Yeah, I only have one mortgage and a residence in California, and I spend my time every week between California and Washington, D.C. This is, again, just Donald Trump doing everything he can to target his enemies. In our lawsuit, it's not lost on me that we've begun to depose members of the administration, and so you can connect the dots there if you will.
Now, he then claimed that he is being targeted alongside the likes of Letitia James, James Comey, John Bolton, Adam Schiff. Okay, there's only one problem. If you actually committed crimes, then you will be, in fact, prosecuted. And if you don't, then presumably you will not. Now, we'll have to see what exactly he did. The probe will investigate allegations, according to Fox News, of millions of dollars in loans and refinancing based on Swalwell declaring that his primary residence was in Washington, D.C. According to the report, the director of the Federal Housing Agency, Bill Pulte, sent AG Pam Bondi a letter on Wednesday accusing Swalwell of possibly making false or misleading statements on loan documents. Apparently, the investigation is into possible mortgage fraud, tax fraud at the state and local levels, insurance fraud, and any related crimes. So we'll have to see, of course, how this plays out. Innocent until proven guilty is, of course, the rule of the day in all of this. Okay, meanwhile, John Fetterman yesterday was unfortunately hospitalized. According to a statement that was put out on his X page, during an early morning walk, Senator Fetterman sustained a fall near his home in Braddock. Out of an abundance of caution, he was transported to a hospital in Pittsburgh. Upon evaluation, it was established he had a ventricular fibrillation flare-up that led to Senator Fetterman feeling lightheaded, falling to the ground, and hitting his face with minor injuries. Senator Fetterman had this to say: "If you thought my face looked bad before, wait until you see it now." Listen, again, Senator Fetterman, he may be the last courageous person in the Democratic Party. Also, it's hard to dislike the guy. I've met Senator Fetterman. He and I disagree on, 80% of issues. Hard to dislike Senator Fetterman. Says he is doing well and receiving routine observation at the hospital. He has opted to stay so doctors can fine-tune his medication regimen. Senator Fetterman is grateful for the EMTs, doctors, and nurses who are providing his care. So we'll bring you all the health updates as they emerge for Senator Fetterman, maybe the last sane Democratic senator. Okay, meanwhile, fascinating things happening at our nation's colleges and universities. So Texas A&M has decided to crack down on woke in the classroom. According to the New York Times, Texas A&M University System Regents voted on Thursday to limit how instructors may discuss matters like gender identity and race ideology in classrooms, tightening the rules in a conservative state where debates over academic freedom have flared for months. Regents who met in College Station on Thursday afternoon unanimously backed a revised proposal decreeing no courses, quote, will advocate race or gender ideology or topics related to sexual orientation or gender identity without a campus president's approval of the course and related materials. A related measure that Regents approved said the faculty members could not teach material inconsistent with the approved syllabus for the course. Well, that is a good thing. That is a very good thing. What is the educational value of teaching queer theory at Texas A&M? Please explain how the taxpayers of Texas are somehow benefited by this, or the tuition payers of Texas are somehow benefited by this. In September, Texas A&M fired a lecturer after a student accused her of teaching a course that recognized more than two genders. Again, why this is controversial is beyond me. I understand that there are a lot of dumb theories that emerge from the universities. There is no reason the taxpayers should subsidize it. There are some members of the university faculty who are upset because they believe that they should be able to do whatever they want with other people's money. Martin Peterson, a philosophy professor, said it was, quote, tempting to agree no academic system course should advocate race or gender ideology, since no serious academic course should promote any ideology. But he said, seeking truth sometimes meant exploring contested ideas. But okay, if you say, here's gender ideology and here's what its critics say, my guess is that the president of the university will greenlight that course. Also, there are a bunch of professors there, particularly in the STEM fields, who say, you know what we need? Better education, because it turns out our educational system is absolutely collapsing. And it is affecting higher education. According to the Free Press, good piece by Tanner Now over there, California officials expect math students in public school to know basic math by the end of second grade. But when some incoming college students were asked basic questions, about 20% could not correctly count. Here's the problem, okay? Sarah had 9 pennies and 9 dimes. How many coins did she have in all? That's not a question as to the value of the pennies and the dimes. That is a question of how many coins, right? That's an easy one. That's 9 plus 9. But apparently 20% of college students got it wrong, incoming college students. And as for the question, solve 10 minus 2, parentheses, and then parentheses, 4 minus 6x equals 0. Okay, which is like a very, very basic algebra question. 80% of incoming college students couldn't solve that problem. We've got a problem in our educational system for sure. A report released last week by the University of California, San Diego, which has about 45,000 students and is one of America's highest ranked public universities, said that the number of entering first-year students whose math skills fall below middle school level increased at nearly 30-fold between 2020 and 2025. The deterioration of basic academic preparation has left incoming students, quote, increasingly unprepared for the quantitative and analytical rigor expected at UC San Diego. The percentage of students who have now been placed in remedial math at UC San Diego is nearing 10%, like 1 out of every 10. That's crazy. And again, that's after they admit these people. Remember, a lot of applicants get rejected. Last fall, Harvard University offered remedial math. Yeah, the university systems, I mean, we're failing at the middle school level, we're failing at the high school level, and we're increasingly failing at the college level because of all of the focus on politically heterodox leftism, as opposed to, actually teaching people the things that matter. And then meanwhile, we're telling people that they need to take out a $50,000 per year loan in order to even get basic employment on the other end. That needs to change, and change in a major way. Alrighty, folks, the show is continuing for our members right now. We'll get into the BBC apologizing to President Trump after slandering him. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. Well, we're here. Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, Abigail Spanberger, the governor-elect of Virginia, Mikey Sherrill, the governor-elect in New Jersey. We'll go through all the results, what it means for the country, and that shocking socialist speech from Zohran Mamdani last night. First, you may know, here at the Daily Wire, we don't always agree, actually. Friendly Fire is the show where Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and I get together to disagree live for the entire internet to see and comment on what could possibly go wrong. Well, a new episode of Friendly Fire premieres in 2 weeks on Daily Wire Plus. And this time, we're also going to world premiere the official trailer for the Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of the Merlin, only on Friendly Fire, November 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. You did it! You really finally did it, you maniacs! You blew it up! Damn you! Well, I mean, the Statue of Liberty, we're in New York, and the Statue of Liberty is half buried in sand now, and Charlton Heston is just yelling at it because of what New York City just decided to do, which was, by an overwhelming margin, actually, hand over the financial center of planet Earth to a Marxist pro-jihadist named Zohran Mamdani, who has never held a real job. And, it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it works out for them. According to the New York Times, Mamdani, riding a historic surge of enthusiasm as the nation's largest city embraced generational and ideological change, well done, New York Times, was elected New York's 111th mayor. The results were evident very early on in the night. It took about 35 minutes for the AP to call the race. Mamdani received 1.1 million people, I believe, voting for him. The turnout yesterday was extraordinarily high. His nearest competitor, Andrew Cuomo, who ran, at best, a somnambulant race, sleepwalking his way through the race. It seemed to be a sense of entitlement for Andrew Cuomo, running in the primaries and then running in the general. He was unable to win the race because of enthusiasm for Mamdani, yes, but also because of wild lack of enthusiasm for Andrew Cuomo, which was quite real. The anti-Mamdani vote was not enough to overcome the pro-Mamdani vote, given the shortcomings of the other candidates, ranging from Eric Adams to Curtis Sliwa. Mamdani's coalition, which we'll get to in a little bit here, was an unusual coalition, to say the least, and he is not hiding the ball. He intends on major change in America's financial center and indeed the financial center of planet Earth. He intends a new system that is going to destroy capitalism. Now, will he actually be able to accomplish that? You know, there are some checks on him. He's got a 51-member city council that he has to run things by. And many of the promises that he has made are third-grade running for school president promises. Free ice cream for everybody and no homework was basically his campaign. That if he said affordability over and over and over, and then if he just threw out a bunch of random things that he will never be able to do, then he would be elected mayor. And it worked. It worked. We now live in a political era characterized on both sides by people accurately diagnosing problems and then not accurately diagnosing any solutions and saying, if you give me ultimate power, I will solve it for you. And it never works. And then we swivel to the other side, and then we swivel back to the first side. And that seems to be the cycle that we are in currently. I want to get more into Mamdani in a moment, but I first want to explain to you the rest of the news that happened last night. Abigail Spanberger also won in Virginia. She won by a large margin in this race over the current lieutenant governor of Virginia, Winsome Earl Sears. She ended up winning by over 10 percentage points. Because that race was not particularly close, she was also able to drag Jay Jones over the line. There's sort of a fascinating contrast between Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, who is considered what would have been called the Blue Dog Democrat. She's not particularly conservative, but she is certainly more moderate than, say, Zohran Mamdani. Her pitch yesterday after she won was that pragmatism was the order of the day. Here is what Abigail Spanberger, the governor-elect of Virginia, had to say.
We sent a message to the whole world that in 2025, Virginia chose pragmatism over partisanship. We chose our Commonwealth over chaos.
Okay, so she is also a candidate who in the past has called out Democratic focus on issues like, for example, the trans issue or on racial issues, saying like this sort of stuff does not win elections. And so it'll be fascinating to see the internecine warfare in the Democratic Party between a moderate victor like Abigail Spanberger, comparatively moderate, versus the Zohran Mamdani, where all the enthusiasm and media coverage is going to go. As said, she dragged Jay Jones over the finish line. He ended up winning by about 7 percentage points over Jason Miyares in that attorney general race in Virginia, despite the fact that Jay Jones, of course, had this very extraordinary texting scandal in which he had apparently texted a Republican that he wanted to kill the Speaker of the House of Delegates in Virginia, and then labeled that speaker's children little fascists. That apparently did not inhibit his election. Here he was yesterday.
To everyone who didn't give up on this campaign, I say thank you. I will protect our jobs, our health care, and our economy from Donald Trump's attacks.
Both Spanberger and Jones, Mamdani too, they focused a lot on President Trump. This is being taken as a repudiation of President Trump. To be fair, President Trump is in fact the president of the United States. These are Democratic states. I think it would have been kind of a shocker if Republicans had won or even been competitive, seriously competitive in any of these states, which brings us to the third state that was up for election last night. And that, of course, was New Jersey. More on these shocking election results. Are they that shocking? What does it mean for the country? We'll get into all that in just a moment. First, let's talk about something that actually matters at a sort of deeper level, honoring American veterans on Veterans Day. Legacy Box has been with the Ben Shapiro Show for years. They've helped preserve the memories of over 1 million families, and now they're teaming up with all of us here at Daily Wire to give back in a big way. Legacy Box is donating $10,000 worth of Legacy Boxes to American veterans, so those incredible stories of service and sacrifice don't get lost to time. Here's where it gets personal. If there's a veteran in your family, head to get.dailywire.com/legacybox or click the link in the show notes to submit their story for a chance to feature their legacy right here on the show, which will be very cool. But even if you don't have a veteran in your life, you still have a legacy worth preserving because everybody does. Right now, Legacy Box is giving all of my listeners exclusive access to this deal in honor of Veterans Day. Just $9 per tape to digitally preserve your family memories. Legacy Box is the world's largest digitizer. They've helped over 1 million families relive their most important moments. They digitize every tape, photo, and film reel by hand right in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They're great. I've used them myself. I've done it for my parents, for my in-laws. You know, it's so meaningful to people when they can see tapes of their parents when they were young and themselves when they were young and show that to their own kids. Whether it's a loved one in uniform or your family's holiday mornings, preserve the stories that shaped you. Head on over to legacybox.com/Shapiro today to preserve your family's history. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Also, There are many reasons I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, but one of the big reasons, they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who served with honor, but when they come home, that brotherhood, that support network they had in the military, too often it disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill that gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company who shares your values. And with talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could be saving a lot of money. Again, I'm not at home right now. It means I'm using my phone to call my children and see how they are doing. And all of my phone calls are important to me, and I'm paying less money, and the people who actually are my phone company, they're doing good things with the money. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Make the switch today. Again, head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk. Unfortunately, Jack Ciattarelli lost to Mikey Sherrill. Ciattarelli had come close in his last election cycle, but that was more of a surprise. I think people saw him coming this time if they're Democrats. And so she ended up winning by, again, a fairly significant margin in New Jersey. Not a gigantic shock because there are almost 900,000 more registered Democrats in New Jersey than registered Republicans. Ciattarelli ran a sort of traditionally conservative campaign. And because he almost surprised Phil Murphy in the last election cycle, I think that Democrats showed up en masse to stop that this time. She, of course, is not particularly moderate. She tries to make up that she is moderate. But it's, again, fascinating to see the sort of ideological diversity inside the Democratic Party. So long as you're anti-Trump, then you can have Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill and, of course, Zohran Mamdani. Which brings us to Zohran Mamdani. And it'll be fascinating, as I say, to see whether the Democratic Party decides to engage in the glossing of Zohran Mamdani as sort of the future of the party. Democrats are resistant. Hakeem Jeffries just yesterday suggested that he was not the face of the party. Of course, I'm old enough to remember when Democrats said AOC was not the face of the party, or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. They are all faces of the party. And it'll be fascinating, again, to see how the Democratic Party treats him. Do they treat him as a sort of outsider? Do they say that he's sort of quirky, the way they treated Bill de Blasio? Or do they embrace him and try to draft off of the energy that he obviously captured in the middle of this campaign? Now, if you look at the polling results, these sort of exit polls from NBC, for example, his coalition is really interesting. So one of the lies that is constantly told about socialist candidates like Zohran Mamdani is that they are the people who get blue-collar voters. They excite the blue-collar voters. One of the things that is different between America and Europe is that, historically speaking, European blue-collar workers tend toward socialism very often. That does not happen in America. In America, blue-collar workers have always been fond of capitalism because it is what provides their jobs. Even in the early union days of the United States, the unions were actually quite actively anti-communist in the United States in a way that they simply were not. They were sort of the vanguard of the proletariat, actually, in much of Europe. That was not the case in the United States, and that remains true today. In fact, Zohran Mamdani's base here was immigrant, extremely progressive, college-educated, and female. Those were the things that drove Zohran Mamdani to victory here. The exit poll, 81% of women under 30 voted for Mamdani. 81% of women under the age of 30 voted for Zohran Mamdani. Now, again, some of that has to do with the fact that Zohran Mamdani, on a personal level, because of the smarmy grin and the inability to bench press 135 pounds, seems particularly non-threatening, as opposed to Andrew Cuomo, who, of course, was ousted from office over his inability to keep his hands off the asses of others. And so I can't imagine that really helped Andrew Cuomo in this race, particularly among women. Young men voted 64% for Zohran Mamdani. Older men, above the age of 65, voted 48% for Cuomo. Men between the ages of 45 and 64 voted for Mamdani by 1%, so it's basically a dead heat. Women overwhelmingly voted for Mamdani, but as you got older, it trended toward Cuomo. When you look at sort of the racial polarization, there wasn't tons of racial polarization here, actually. The white voters in New York City voted basically dead even between Mamdani and Cuomo, according to these exit polls. Black voters voted 55-40 in favor of Mamdani. Hispanic voters voted 49-42 in favor of Mamdani. Asian voters, which would largely be South Asian, meaning Muslim voters, voted overwhelmingly for Mamdani. And as I say, on an educational level, this idea that it was like blue-collar voters who put Mamdani over the top, that's not true. Actually, 20% of the electorate never attended college, apparently. 39% voted Mamdani. 47% voted for Andrew Cuomo. If you attended college but didn't graduate with a degree, 48 to 40 in favor of Cuomo. Associate's degree, 48 to 45 in favor of Cuomo. If you have a bachelor's, 57 to 37. If you have an advanced degree, 57 to 37. So these are elite belief systems. Elite belief systems and his sort of appeal to foreign populations or foreign-born populations was sort of the Zoran Mamdani model. And that's not a shock. DSA openly acknowledged this in the primary against Cuomo. They said they went into progressive areas and drove out turnout there. And then they went into ethnic enclaves and Muslim areas and drove out turnout over there. And that was the model. And then he sort of broadened out that coalition to include a lot of white college-educated women in particular. When it came to faith, a plurality of Protestants or other Christians voted 49-42 in favor of Cuomo. Catholics voted 53-33 in favor of Cuomo. Jews voted 63-33 in favor of Cuomo. Right? And again, that is largely driven by the Orthodox Jewish population. Even some conservative Jews were very, very not pro-Mamdani. The 33% of Jews who voted for Zoran Mamdani, I would guarantee you that these are people who do not regularly attend synagogue, keep kosher in any way, or have any relationship truly with their religion in a very serious way. Other, there was no Muslim category here. Other, which I assume means Muslim, voted 70 to 25 in favor of Mamdani. Straight people in this election voted 46-46. LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign voted 82 to 15 in favor of Zoran Mamdani. So, again, a fascinating breakdown there. But one of the things that it shows is that Zoran Mamdani, pretending to be a sort of person of the people, against the rich, against the college educated, against the elites. There is an elite class in New York City who work for government or nonprofits, who make a good living, who graduated from college, have college degrees, or are people who he explicitly appealed to as quote-unquote outsiders to the system, suggesting that basically it was immigrant populations versus everybody else. And that was his victory speech. So last night, Mamdani wins, and then he delivers what is an extraordinary victory speech, truly extraordinary, because he just says all the quiet parts out loud. If this is the future of the Democratic Party, go for it, guys. It's playing with fire. I mean, by the way, New York City is playing with fire. His policy proposals are trash. If he implements any of them, they are in serious trouble. The best thing that can happen to Zoran Mamdani is he can do this communist happy talk. He can do his sort of pro-jihadist happy talk, and nothing that he says actually gets done. That is the best thing that can happen to him because, again, there are systemic checks and balances that prevent Mamdani from sort of single-handedly destroying the city. And so he should not get credit for not destroying the city because of things he was not allowed to do. It turns out that if he wants to raise taxes, he has to go to the state level, and the state legislature is very unlikely to want to increase taxes again. He says that he wants to make all the buses free. How's he going to pay for it? How's he going to do any of this stuff? Mostly, he won't be able to get any of that stuff done. And then he will rail against the system, presumably. And that's, if he wants to win re-election, how he will win re-election. Nothing will change, but he'll rail against the system that didn't allow him to do all of the worst things. I can say that the number of people from whom I have received texts who run businesses in New York openly talking about moving their businesses is extraordinary. I am happy on a personal level to help facilitate the move of anyone who wants to get out of New York City to Nashville or to Florida, to a zero-tax state that is friendly to business. I think we're going to set up some sort of portal for people who want to do that because Mamdani will make the business climate here disastrous. Crime will go up. His proposals are foolish in the extreme. Already coming up, Zoran Mamdani makes a full mask-off Bane from The Dark Knight Rises speech upon his victory. We'll get to all that in a moment. First, let's be blunt. Gold just hit $4,000 an ounce for the first time ever. Currently, it's up 50% for the year. That's not speculation. That's just reality. If a portion of your savings isn't diversified into gold, you are, in fact, missing the boat. I recently re-upped with Birch Gold like a few months back because, I'm not super certain about where the economy is going. Inflation remains too high. The U.S. dollar is still too weak. Government debt, it's insurmountable. Central banks have been flocking to gold as a hedge. It's not too late. As I say, I just did this again myself. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. You're not going to pay a dime out of pocket. Just text BEN to 989898. Claim your free info kit. There's no obligation, just useful information. Facts do not care about your feelings. The fact is, gold has been a safe haven for millennia. What else can say that. Text Ben to 989898 right now. Claim your free info kit on gold. They make the process super simple. When I called them up, got an expert on the line, asked all my questions, got my answers. Now there's gold sitting in my safe. Text Ben to 989898 to get started today. Protect your future with Birch Gold. Also, Thanksgiving is about gratitude, family, friends, food. Between travel costs, groceries, Black Friday deals, your wallet might be feeling a little bit of a squeeze. If money stress is creeping in this holiday season, it is the perfect time to focus on your credit health, because strong credit means less financial stress, not just in November, but the entire year long. And this is where Kickoff comes in. Kickoff makes building credit incredibly simple. You sign up in minutes from your phone, no credit check, no hidden fees, zero interest. Users with credit under 600 grew an average of 84 points in their first year with on-time payments. For just $1, your first month, you can start building credit immediately and continue with transparent plans starting at $5 a month. Set up autopay. You never have to worry again about missing a payment. Credit bureaus see your good behavior and your score can grow fast. With over 1 million users and hundreds of thousands of positive reviews, it's clear why Kickoff has become the #1 credit builder on the App Store. It's the safe, trusted, affordable way to take control of your credit journey. So start building credit with Kickoff today. Get your first month for as little as $1. That's 80% off the normal price when you go to getkickoff.com/Shapiro today. That's kickoff without the C, KIKOFF.com/Shapiro. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/Shapiro to activate offer. Offer applies to new Kickoff customers first month only. Subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Average first year credit score impact plus 84 points. Vantage score 3.0 between January 2023 and January 2024 for Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score. Individual results may vary. Last night, he gives this speech. In this speech, he does not quote any of the American founders. Right? Typically, when you win, you tend to quote the founding ideals of the country. He doesn't even pay lip service to the founding ideals of the country. In fact, his entire speech is about how America historically is trash, and how all of the fundamental principles of America are trash, and how he's here to change things on a radical, fundamental level. That was his entire speech yesterday. It's a deeply radical speech. The people that he quoted in this speech are Eugene V. Debs, a socialist candidate from the 1910s, and Nehru, the socialist leader of the non-aligned India in the post-partition era. Those are the people he quoted. There was no Washington, there was no Jefferson, there was no Lincoln. The only other person he quoted, mainly because he really hates Andrew Cuomo and wanted to stab him, is at one point he quoted Mario Cuomo, Andrew's father. Those are the people he quoted. That is not a coincidence. So I want to go through the speech in a little bit of detail because it shows you where the vanguard of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing of the Democrat, where they think we are and how much they truly, truly despise status quo of America and America historically. So here he was leading off with a quote from, again, a socialist, Eugene V. Debs.
Thank you, my friends. The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
Okay, so a dawn for a better day for humanity. Again, there's that Marxist language right off the bat. So Barack Obama also had this transformational language as though the hearts of man were going to be changed, like the prophets. We're going to remove the heart of stone and replace it with the heart of flesh. Okay, this has always been the Marxist idea. The Marxist idea is that humanity is fundamentally changeable if you change the economic system. The sort of religious, traditional, biblical idea is that, nope, humanity is what humanity is. Humanity is what humanity was. Humanity does not fundamentally change. You can change yourself if you take on certain actions or if you accept certain things into your life, but humanity itself is not changing. The Marxist idea is that all the evils of humanity are created by the economic system, and so if you change your systems, then there will be a better day for humanity. Not just for New York, but like humans will change. Okay, he then continues by posing a false dichotomy in which he suggests that the wealthy and powerful in New York have been controlling. I just have a question for a moment. Just one question. The mayor of New York was Bill de Blasio, who was basically a communist not very long ago. Eric Adams can hardly be said to be a scion of Milton Friedman or Frederick von Hayek. New York City has not been the preserve of the dominant elite financial class in terms of governance for quite a while here. And in fact, the history of New York City is very much a sort of class warfare zone. The 60s and 70s under, for example, John Lindsay, They turned into a class warfare zone. That's just a reality. So Zohran Mamdani is saying something deeply ahistorical and also untrue, and it is all about this idea that there is some sort of perverse, manipulative class that is interested in stealing money from the pockets of the working folks. Again, he wasn't hiding the ball here.
For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Fingers bruised from lifting boxes on the warehouse floor, palms calloused from delivery bike handlebars, knuckles scarred with kitchen burns. These are not hands that have been allowed to hold power. And yet, over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands. My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty.
Again, this is the kind of stuff that excites progressives. It also is almost a direct quote from Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, which was half the speech. It belongs to you, the people. And then he went on to basically stab Andrew Cuomo in the face. I mean, again, typically in politics, magnanimity in victory is a pretty nice traditional way of doing things. No magnanimity happening right here from Zohran Mamdani toward Andrew Cuomo.
I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few. New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change, a mandate for a new kind of politics, a mandate for a city we can afford, and a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that.
I mean, first of all, put aside the absolute kind of jackassery of let this be the final time we utter the name and may he be banished to the forbidden zone. Ridiculous kind of stuff. But then when he says that there's a mandate for a new kind of politics, a mandate for a city we can afford, a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that, this is the thing that drives me absolutely up a wall about the way that we do politics in this country. Again, all of his plans are trash. I mean, really bad. He says that there's a mandate for change. There's always a mandate for change. That's literally what elections are. They are a mandate for change. When there's a party change, when there's a person who changes, it's a mandate for change. But the question is a mandate for what? If the idea is there's a mandate in New York City for him to hem in the police in favor of social workers, or for free buses, as I said on CNN's live stream last night, I'm very much looking forward to never having to pay for a hotel again in New York City. I'm just going to ride the buses around. I'll just get on. They're free. They can't kick me off. Why the hell not? As long as I don't get stabbed in the face, which may very well happen in a city of New York governed by Zohran Mamdani, who thinks that the police are inhibitors of human freedom. It's pretty incredible. Okay, he continued by talking about the people he thinks were forgotten. And you'll notice the coalition. Again, Zohran Mamdani believes that his coalition is immigrants, new immigrants to New York City who have been culturally dispossessed in some way by, I suppose, the great white superstructure.
You showed that when politics speaks to you without condescension, we can usher in a new era of leadership. We will fight for you because we are you. Or as we say on Steinway, ana minkum wa ilaykum. Thank you to those so often forgotten by the politics of our city who made this movement their own. I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties.
Yeah, and that yes, auntie's line was a nod to the fact that he said that his auntie, who was not in fact his aunt, was victimized by 9/11 because people gave her nasty looks on the subway, supposedly in a completely non-confirmable story. Notice the litany there. Again, who's not included? Who's not included? Native-born New Yorkers, right? That's not included. White people of any stripe, not included. And that's the coalition that he sees as his coalition, pretty clearly. And again, the sort of drama with which he infuses his own candidacy, that basically this is the dispossessed of the earth. Frantz Fanon's wretched of the earth. We're now taking power in New York. I mean, it infuses everything that he is saying here. He continued.
Now I know that I have asked for much from you over this last year. Time and again, you have answered my calls. But I have one final request. New York City, breathe this moment in. We have held our breath for longer than we know.
Again, that's a reference, I assume, to BLM and the idea that we can't breathe and all the rest of this kind of stuff. Again, the idea is that there is a perennial underclass in America, and now he has liberated them. We have liberated them to take over the city. If you're a business owner, man, you should be running for the hills. If you're a person who pays taxes in the city, you should be scared out of your mind, truly. In fact, I asked our friends and sponsors at Comet, which is a project of Perplexity, please provide me a chart of percentage of total taxes in New York City paid by tax bracket. And here is the answer. Here's an up-to-date chart showing the percentage of total personal income tax paid in New York City by tax bracket for the 2021 tax year. The data illustrate how the highest earners pay a disproportionately large share of total city taxes, with the top 1% contributing nearly half, and the top 0.1% alone contributing about a quarter of the total. The lowest 50% of earners, less than $50,000 AGI, paid about 4% of total New York City personal income taxes. Households in the 50 to 90% bracket, which is 50,000 to 250,000, paid about 20%. The 90 to 99% group, which is up to $1 million, contributed approximately 27%. Those in the top 0.9%, 99 to 99.9%, paid 24%. And the top 0.1% of filers, over $25 million AGI, which is annual gross income, contributed 1/4 of New York City's total personal income tax receipt. And Zohar Mamdani's idea is, what if we squeeze them, like even harder? Surely they won't go anywhere. I mean, after all, they don't have the money to, well, and they certainly don't have the assets to actually just, take, well, good luck, my dude, because he is a full-scale demagogic communist. I mean, that is what Zohar Mamdani is. It's truly, truly amazing. Of course, he says that he speaks in the language of hope because, again, the jackboots always come first with the smiley face.
And while we cast our ballots alone, we chose hope together. Hope over tyranny. Hope over big money and small ideas. Hope over despair. We won because New Yorkers allowed themselves to hope that the impossible could be made possible. And we won because we insisted that no longer would politics be something that is done to us. Now it is something that we do.
Okay, so again, the idea is that you're a passive victim. Politics was happening to you. Again, New York has elections all the time. And in fact, Democrats have won many of those elections. But he's not a Democrat. He's a Democrat socialist. And then he talks about his agenda. And he lists out a bunch of things that are not going to happen. Now, I know, I was on CNN, the live stream last night with Anna Kasparian, and we were on with Charlemagne and Harry Ensign. There's a lot of talk about how you said affordability over and over. Yeah, I too can say affordability. In fact, my 2-year-old can say affordability if you say it to him slowly and have it repeat it. But I'm not sure why saying affordability over and over is a solution to affordability. It is not like Beetlejuice. You do not say affordability 3 times and magically the rents are lowered. Well, he seems to think that you do. So here he was talking about his magical agenda. And New Yorkers, you can only hope none of this happens.
This will be an age where New Yorkers expect from their leaders a bold vision of what we will achieve. rather than a list of excuses for what we are too timid to attempt. Central to that vision will be the most ambitious agenda to tackle the cost of living crisis that this city has seen since the days of Fiorella LaGuardia. An agenda that will freeze the rents for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Make buses fast and free. And deliver universal childcare across our city.
And again, free ice cream for everyone. Yes. And if you believe this, then I guess I have a radical jihadi supporter Marxist for you for mayor. I mean, I guess that's what you guys wanted. Okay, then he talked, of course, about Donald Trump. Because undergirding a lot of this is the idea that he is a backlash to Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump was made the bugaboo here. Here he went after President Trump, again, listing off all of the supposed victims of President Trump, the multi-ethnic, multi-sexual coalition against President Trump.
In this moment of political darkness, New York will be the light. Here, we believe in standing up for those we love. Whether you are an immigrant, a member of the trans community, one of the many black women that Donald Trump has fired from a federal job, a single mom still waiting for the cost of groceries to go down, or anyone else with their back against the wall, your struggle is ours too.
Well, I mean, again, he is not hiding the ball. He did try to pay lip service to fighting anti-Semitism. Even there, he could not stop, but paid much more attention to supposed Islamophobia in New York, a city where they just elected a man to the mayoralty who posed alongside an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and refused to say Hamas should be disarmed. That guy was just elected mayor of New York, and he's talking about the scourge of Islamophobia. If you are a Jew in New York City, prepare for some pretty hard times. Because if you believe Zohran Mamdani is going to fight anti-Semitism while simultaneously celebrating Globalize the Intifada and saying that the Prime Minister of Israel ought to be arrested, and also he has no thoughts on Hamas disarming, prepare to be surprised. That is not going to go the way that I think some of you think it's going to go.
And we will build a city hall that stands steadfast alongside Jewish New Yorkers and does not waver in the fight against the scourge of anti-Semitism. Where the more than 1 million Muslims know that they belong. Not just in the 5 boroughs of this city, but in the halls of power. No more will New York be a city where you can traffic in Islamophobia and win an election.
Meanwhile, he did sum up by saying, basically, government is great for everything. There are 0 things government can't do. It's all just been a matter of will. It's not a matter of competence. It's not a matter of your rights. It's a matter of will. If you just have the will, the Nietzschean will, government can do literally anything. Government is magic.
This new age will be defined by a competence and a compassion that have too long been placed at odds with one another. We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
Okay, now, again, Mamdani's entire shtick here is that he's sort of representative of the proletariat, which is incredible. The dude grew up in wealth. He was given every benefit it is possible to have. He's never held a real job until now. And yet somehow he is the person who is going to unite the people earning $20 an hour with the people earning $30 an hour. One of the sort of gigantic lies of Marxism is that the way capitalism works is pitting people who are poor against one another so that they don't eat the rich. No, that's not how capitalism works. Capitalism, the reason it's successful is because it raises all the boats. That is the reason. That doesn't mean everybody's boat is going to be equally well placed in the water. But as the water rises, it rises for everyone. And all the boats float. That's the basic idea of capitalism. But again, it's all class warfare for Zohran Mamdani. And then, of course, he goes back to Trump. And he says that President Trump has betrayed the nation. He's going to usher in a generation of change. Hey, guys, if you don't find this frightening and this is actually kind of like a sexy pitch to you, well, I really, really hope that you get used to breadlines.
Together, we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So, Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
And again, I'm sure this is catnip for a lot of progressives, but dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. So I assume here you're talking about capitalism and democracy, which were the 2 things that allowed Donald Trump to accumulate power. He was elected president twice, and he became much richer because of capitalism. Mamdani concluded by saying that he is unapologetically himself, which is certainly true. It's certainly true. He says he's charting a new path, a non-conventional path. I mean, again, true. But there are many paths in life, and some of them lead off cliffs.
And we must chart a new path, as bold as the one we have already traveled. After all, the conventional wisdom would tell you that I am far from the perfect candidate. I am young, despite my best efforts to grow older. I am Muslim. I am a democratic socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Well, I mean, okay. H.L. Mencken, the famous columnist from the early 20th century, once said, "The democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard." Well, hope you enjoy, really, New Yorkers, and I'm glad that I have some Florida real estate that is available at a fetching price for those of you who wish to escape a city that is likely to go down the tubes over the course of the next several years if, in fact, Zohran Mamdani gets his way. Already coming up, Hassan Piker has some interesting comments about the victory of Zohran Mamdani. Mask off moment for Hassan Piker, but the mask is usually off with Hassan. And a bizarre theory about why Democrats did well yesterday. Apparently, Republicans must embrace interviews that gloss Nick Fuentes if they want to defeat Zohran Mamdani or something. And we'll try to make our way through whatever that is. First, look, I'm on the road constantly, like right now, covering news stories, political events, you name it. Between flights and hotel rooms, sometimes getting a proper nutritional meal is the first thing that goes out the window. Here's the thing. I've got a wife and kids at home counting on me to stay healthy. That's why I started taking Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies supplements. These are the whole original food supplements. 16 fruits and veggies, freeze-dried into capsules. As somebody who keeps kosher, I appreciate there are no binders, no fillers, no flow agents. It's just 100% whole food ingredients. Nothing added that shouldn't be there. When I'm rushing through an airport, I can take them with water. If I'm in the car between interviews, I can chew them. Sometimes I'll even open the capsules and mix the powder into my smoothies. However the day is going, they go with me. Balance of Nature delivers the natural goodness of fruits, veggies, spices, and fibers the way nature intended, which means even when I am, 1,000 miles from home, I'm still taking care of myself the way my family needs me to. After years of research and development, they've created something that makes getting proper nutrition convenient for any lifestyle. So go check them out right now, balanceofnature.com. Get a free fiber and spice supplement plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code Shapiro. Again, that's balanceofnature.com. Also, sleep can be your secret weapon. It's cold and flu season. If you do not get your sleep, your immune system is going to drop and it makes it more likely you will get sick. But here's the thing, hard to get good sleep on a terrible mattress. And this is why you need one made personally for you, which is why Helix is important. Finding the right mattress does not have to be guesswork. Helix makes it super simple with their sleep quiz. They ask you about your preferences and your sleep style, and then they match you with the mattress that's actually right for you. And they're not just making promises. Helix is the most awarded mattress brand out there with glowing reviews from Forbes, Wired, and other trusted experts. The best part, they deliver straight to your your door with free shipping, so no hauling anything yourself. Plus, with their Happy with Helix guarantee, you get 120 nights to try it out and a limited lifetime warranty. So if it's not working for you, returns and exchanges are totally seamless. It's basically a risk-free way to finally get the sleep you deserve, especially when you need that sleep, which you will. I mean, you got a busy life. Go to helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name into the post-purchase survey so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/Ben. Well, as if it weren't clear enough what Zohran Mamdani is saying, one of the people he hosted at his election night party was one Hassan Piker, with whom he had posed, a person who said that America deserved 9/11. And just in case he wasn't saying it loud enough, last night, about a couple minutes after hugging AOC, Hassan Piker then declared it a tragedy that the United States defeated the Soviet Union.
What do you think it means that this guy ran as a socialist and anti-communism didn't work to stop him? That's big.
Yeah, I think we are in the heart of the imperial core. This is the country that defeated the USSR, unfortunately. And the reality of the matter is, there's a lot of antagonism. There's no class consciousness in the United States of America. It's one of the things that I try to address every day with my commentary. And I will say this, the conditions have deteriorated so much that everyday Americans, in spite of their lack of class consciousness, are finally arriving at the conclusion that perhaps there is an alternative out there. There is an alternative that focuses on them as opposed to the interests of the billionaires and the millionaires, as opposed to the interests of the capital owners. And I mean, you can't help but notice that. You can't help but feel at least a little bit of excitement around that.
I mean, anybody who thinks that it was unfortunate that the Soviet Union, which is responsible for the murder of legitimately tens of millions of human beings, and then given their involvement with the establishment of the Chinese autocracy, more tens of millions of human beings, at least they're saying the quiet part out loud now before they shock their dog in their $3 million mansion. Well, meanwhile, the dumb takes come hot and heavy these days, truly stupid takes. The dumb take from the right is that the reason that Zohran Mamdani is now mayor of New York, or that Mikey Sherrill won in New Jersey, or that Abigail Spanberger won in Virginia, is because people were critical of Tucker Carlson's interview with a neo-Nazi last week. A few things about this. Well, one, Jack Posobiec tweeted, "Thank goodness so many conservative pundits spent the last few weeks focusing on e-drama and cancellation efforts instead of working to get out the vote. That was very helpful to the movement." And I will point out at this point that Tucker Carlson, who has come under absolutely deserved fire for glossing Nick Fuentes last week, the infighting did not begin with people critical of Tucker Carlson. It began with Tucker Carlson, who has spent precisely zero effective time attacking Zohran Mamdani. I have before me a list of the times that Tucker Carlson mentioned Zohran Mamdani. And the answer is, he mentioned Zohran Mamdani on episodes 3 times in the last 2 years. 2 years. And he did mention Zohran Mamdani one time in the past month. It was with Marjorie Taylor Greene praising him on October 22nd.
That guy was the only person in the New York City mayor's debate to say he wanted to focus on New York City. All the candidates were asked, if you could visit a foreign country, what would it be? And they, of course, all had an answer. I think most said Israel. Great. And he said, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay in New York. And if I want to meet Jewish constituents, I go to their synagogues, their homes or whatever, but I'd be here in New York because that's what I'm doing. I'm running New York. That's my job.
Well, he gave the right answer.
He gave the right answer.
I mean, with that kind of critique, I can't imagine how Zohran Mamdani won. I mean, that sort of fiery critique of Zohran Mamdani's pro-jihadism and Marxism. I mean, wow. Stellar stuff. By the way, just by way of comparison, I had my staff count up how many times I have covered Zohran Mamdani at length on this program since just June. The answer is 64. Since October 5th, the answer is 17 times since October 5th. In the last week, I did 4 separate episodes about Zohran Mamdani. By the way, we also cut a Get Out the Vote ad basically for Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey. And you may have noticed where we're in New York. My entire team came to New York to cover this particular story. So if we're talking about who is directing fire against the left, which seems to be the question, I think it is pretty obvious who is not directing fire against the left. In fact, That Marjorie Taylor Greene, beloved of Tucker Carlson's program, and a person who is earning strange new respect from the left, she had the opportunity yesterday to appear on The View. Now, that's kind of an unusual opportunity for people on the right. Typically, you're not given an opportunity to appear on The View, specifically because they don't want anybody right-wing on. But the good news is that The View, which used to consider Marjorie Taylor Greene a low IQ Republican worried about Jewish space lasers, now they consider her a low IQ Republican concerned about Jewish space lasers, but also who agrees with them. And that means she gets on The View. So yesterday, she definitely focused in on Zohar Mamdani. It was election day. She focused in, really where it mattered on Zohar Mamdani by blaming the Republicans for the government shutdown. Just slow clap for these. No fighting inside the. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene, doing the hard work of fighting the left by, never fighting the left.
When I ran for Congress in 2020, I ran criticizing Republicans and Democrats equally because I come from a working class family, ran a construction company for over 20 years, and I feel like the government has failed all of us. And it purely disgusts me. It really does. And I represent a district that is rural, manufacturing district, blue collar workers. And people have been crushed by decades of failure in Washington, D.C. And so I have no problem pointing fingers at everyone.
And just to be clear, she also ripped on MAGA explicitly as well as the Republican leadership. But really the reason Zohar Mamdani won is because some of us were critical of people glossing white supremacists. That's probably why Zohar Mamdani won. In fact, what we probably should do is unite with white supremacists to defeat Zohar Mamdani while the white supremacists try to drag down the entire conservative movement. That's probably the way we ought to do it. Here was MTG again, doing the hard work of fighting Zohar Mamdani by ripping on MAGA and Republican leadership. Just well done, as always.
I think there's a lot of paid social media influencers. And I found it very interesting that they were the MAGA accounts, but they're all paid. And they all attacked me when I announced I was coming to join you ladies on The View. And I think that's very weak and pathetic. But when I talk about weak Republican men, I'm pretty much talking oftentimes about the leadership in the House and the Senate. And they're not getting our agenda done.
Again, with this kind of, cogent defense of conservative principles there from Marjorie Taylor Greene or from Tucker Carlson, who has spent the last several years demoralizing conservatives by siding with and glossing some of the worst people on planet Earth. And then we're told that unless there's I need an explainer. Truly, I need an explainer, like a statistical explainer on how unifying with people who are actively anti-conservative is going to somehow grow the conservative coalition against the left. I want an explainer because it doesn't add up logically or mathematically. And if you want Zohar Mamdani not just to be mayor of New York, but governor of New York, and people like Zohar Mamdani to be president of the United States, then Republicans could definitely do the thing that some seem to want to do, which is fringe out their own party by unifying with a wing that is fundamentally anti-conservative, that disagrees with Donald Trump on many of the key issues of Donald Trump's actual platform. That's not a theory, that's an impulse. It's not a well thought out logical idea. It is an act of ideological pusillanimity. Well, on a more positive note, after all that terrible political news, I'm joined on the line by Leland Vittert. He's host of On Balance with Leland Vittert. He serves as News Nation's chief Washington anchor. He's also the author of a brand new book, a really tremendously inspiring book titled Born Lucky, A Dedicated Father, a Grateful Son, and My Journey with Autism. Leland Vittert, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Ben, good to be with you.
So your book is really inspiring. It's an amazing story. So why don't you sort of spell out what the book is about and why you wrote it?
Yeah, so Born Lucky is hope for every parent of a kid who's having a hard time, not just with autism like I did, but ADHD, anxiety, bullying, the difficulties growing up. It's to give parents the hope that my parents didn't have. When I was about 6 years old, they were told I needed to be evaluated. Worst thing any parent can ever hear. Ben, your father, you know what that would be like. And they take me to one of those medical testing centers, old magazines, stale coffee. They wait a couple of hours. The woman brings me back and says, it's very difficult to understand what's going on inside his head. He's got serious behavioral issues. So play dates, birthday parties, none of that was going to happen. But even if a kid would just touch me in a way I didn't like, I'd turn around and slug him. Big sensory issues. If I had a jacket on I didn't like, or socks, anything like that, I would just melt down. And terrible learning disabilities. So IQ is 2 halves of a test averaged together. A 20-point spread between the 2 halves is a learning disability. I had a 70-point spread. They said it was the biggest spread they'd ever seen. So my dad, like any father, asks, what do we do? And she says, there's not much you can do. And he goes, is there anything we can do? And she said, generally not. And my dad with that said that he felt as though that I, in my current form at that point, would not really have an opportunity for a happy or productive, normal life. And he said, so at that point, he decided, I am going to adapt Lucky, which was my nickname, to the world rather than the world to Lucky. And Born Lucky is the story of him adapting me for the world and teaching me the social and emotional fabric that comes so naturally to most people, trying to find a way to give a kid who wasn't going to be good at school and wasn't going to have friends self-esteem. That's the Born Lucky story.
I mean, that's an amazing thing, because the medicalization of a lot of these problems has led parents to believe that if there is not a drug that sort of fixes it, that if the medical community doesn't have an answer, that basically you despair, or you have to, as you say in reverse, sort of change the world to fit the kid. And so the idea is that the world has to make adjustments. And instead, it sounds like your father recognized the reality, which is that if you were going to be successful in the world, then it was going to have to be a very hard road to train you to be ready for that world. So what are the kinds of things that your dad would have you do, given all of those challenges?
Yeah, look, starting when I was about 5 or 6 years old, he figured he needed to teach me self-esteem. Self-esteem to him is earned, not given. So it started with push-ups, 200 push-ups a day, 5 days a week, for 3 or 4 months, and then you got some kind of reward. And the idea was to teach me that hard work would yield results. Character. He said there's 2 things you can control, your character and your hard work. And then he would start taking me out with his friends. He said that he knew I wasn't going to have any friends. You know, he never told anybody about my diagnosis or anything. No teachers, no counselors, none of his friends. He and my mom suffered silently as it was. But he would take me out to a lunch with his friends. And when I would start talking too much or interrupt or ask a question that was off rhythm, he would tap his watch. And that was my signal to stop talking. And then to sort of bookmark that moment. And later we would post game it, right? We would go through, okay, so when Mr. Shapiro was talking about his kids, why'd you interrupt and ask him about how he gets sponsors at the Daily Wire? Well, I don't know, Dad, that was kind of interesting to me. Okay, what could you have asked Mr. Shapiro about? And then we would role play that conversation. And then the flip side was, you know, I was severely bullied, ended up being taken out of 3 or 4 different schools. One scene in Born Lucky, my dad comes to find me in 5th grade at, I think, my 3rd elementary school. And for the past month, they had put me with the girls. So you can imagine a father looking out at PE fields, asking the PE teacher, how's his kid doing? And realize that they put me with the girls to protect me from the bullying. So it was also the flip side of that was he became sort of my only person and my only protector and friend. So every night he and I'd spend a couple of hours together, and he was sort of putting me back together from the emotional torture and isolation and bullying that happened every day.
So now, obviously, you're grown, you're a successful person, which is it's an unbelievable story. Do you still struggle with some of those same issues that you did when you were a kid? How much of this were you able to sort of train out of?
Oh, it's a great point, Ben. And, you know, Born Lucky is not a prescription. It's not a cure. And in the book, I equate autism a little bit like alcoholism. You got to work at it every day. It's a discipline. Just a couple of months ago, I was playing golf with my father-in-law. I was trying to get ready after the golf game to leave. We were late. One thing about autism, you become really task-focused. So I was trying to get my golf bag into the travel bag to leave. And this older gentleman comes over to say hello to me. I met him earlier in the day. And he's trying to talk to me. And autism, you become so task-focused, you block everything out. And that's what I was doing while I was packing my golf bag. So at 43 years old, it was like I was 8 years old again. And I could hear the voice of my dad, Lucky, you know, you need to stop. You need to stand up, look Mr. So-and-so in the eye, talk to him. And I could not do it. It was sort of stunning to me, and it just was soul-crushing. And I sent him a note later. I found his phone number and just wrote a note. I said, I just want to apologize for being so rude to you. He eventually just walked away from me because I wouldn't talk to him. And in that note, I never once said, oh, by the way, I have autism. And that's sort of the message that my dad taught me, which is that you can never use your diagnosis either as an excuse or allow it to define you. And that's why he didn't tell me or anybody else until I was in my 20s.
Now, Leland, one of the most amazing things about what you're saying right here is that all of these lessons are broadly applicable to kids who don't have autism. I have 4 kids, thank God, all healthy as far as we know. And everything that you're saying, these are just good parenting tactics, period. And yet parents will treat kids who don't even have autism, don't have some sort of condition, they will treat them as though the world ought to adapt to their needs, as though the world is somehow wronging them. I feel like we've trained an entire generation of people to be unable to cope, despite the fact that they don't even have the challenges that you grew up with.
Well, I think that's why Born Lucky has resonated in the way it has been. You're a best-selling author, and oftentimes when people say, how's the book doing, people want to know how the sales are. For us, in Born Lucky, what I've been most sort of unbelievably humbled by is the hundreds, if not thousands, of emails I've gotten from parents of kids who aren't on the spectrum, saying this has changed my perspective on parenting, because Born Lucky is the proof of the power and agency every parent has to help their kids be more. And you point out rightly, and I've always been inspired watching your show and listening to you, how dedicated you are to your kids. This is proof of what really involved parents can do. And you're right, it is almost an anti-coddling manifesto. We didn't write it as that. I didn't write it as that. I just wrote it to sort of say thank you to my dad. But I think you're right that it's hit this nerve, that it's telling parents something that they're not being told. And they're not being told really how much they can do to help their kids and to prepare their kids.
And again, I think the book is radically inspiring because you're an inspiring person. You've become successful despite all of this, and maybe because of the parenting that you received because you had this in the first place. And that should be a hope for a lot of parents who have kids who are suffering from this sort of stuff, or who have kids who they just need to change and they need to figure out how to do that. The book is Born Lucky, A Dedicated Father, A Grateful Son, and My Journey with Autism. Leland, thanks so much for the time. Congrats on the book.
Thanks, Ben.
Alrighty, folks, the show continues for our members right now. Interestingly, there are some members of the Hollywood contingent who are beginning to realize that maybe only aiming at the far left is a bad business strategy. We'll get to that in a moment. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you are not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.